What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. This episode is all about one of my favorite characters, and that is Gohan. Gohan has been getting a lot of shine lately in Dragon Ball, and he's one of my favorite characters. Like I said, he's just I've always appreciated his character. I've always thought he was great, despite all the hate that he gets for not living up to his dad's potential as far as being a warrior 24/7. I think he's overhated, and he's one of the characters I appreciate most in the series, despite the hate that he gets. And a lot of that has to do with just how his story is told and just the way he's introduced as a character and how his story unfolds. It's really got nothing to do with how strong he is or, whether or not he decides to be a warrior. It's just the overall expression of his story and how it's told. I really love it. So this is going to be my review of Gohan's character. And we're going to start from the very beginning and work our way all the way up to Dragon Ball Superhero. So let's go ahead and get started. So when Gohan is first introduced to us in the story, he just seems like a normal little boy. He doesn't seem to have the same wild attitude as his father, nor does he seem to have his abilities. He seems very meek. He seems very, he's just not like his dad. When he's first introduced to the story, he just looks like a normal child with a tail. As Goku is introducing his son to the rest of his old friends, we find that his older brother Raditz is on the way to drop a bomb on him about his past. Now, this is relevant for quite a few reasons. Now, Gohan himself is named after Goku's grandfather. Now, you'll notice, Gohan is very polite, and Grandpa Gohan is responsible for teaching Goku sense of manners. So, right off the bat, we get to see that he fits the namesake of his grandfather very well. Also, unlike Goku, Gohan is not wild. And the whole thing between Grandpa Gohan and Goku is that Grandpa Gohan, quote-unquote, tamed Goku's nature. So the fact that Gohan is sort of born with a tamed nature is very relevant to his namesake. It's part of the reason that he's named Gohan. But that's not the only reason. A lot of people think that he's just named after Gohan for the sake of it because that's Goku's grandfather. But actually, on the contrary, there's a much deeper reason why he's named Gohan. And it's shown to us throughout the series as it progresses, but essentially what it is we are transitioning here from a Buddhist martial arts shonen manga to a sci-fi aesthetic shonen martial arts manga. This is a transition, and Gohan is the product of the original series. Everything about his character is meant to represent all of the themes from the original series having to face the themes of the new series. Now, you're probably wondering, what's the change? What is the one big theme that changes whenever Goku and Gohan transition into Dragon Ball Z? And that theme is Darwinism, survival of the fittest. Toriyama decides to use Darwinism in Dragon Ball Z as a counter idea to Buddhism. And there's a reason for that, because in Buddhism, neutrality or balance is key. And survival of the fittest, or Darwinism, is amoral in nature in terms of what it teaches about death and destruction and killing each other. There's not really any morality to it. It's just wiping out each other for the benefit of your own kind. That is a counter idea, in a sense, to the ideas of Buddhism, because they preach peace and pretty much the opposite ideas in every way. But despite that, Taoism and Buddhism, it preaches amorality as a principle of itself. So, due to the fact that Darwinism is also amoral in nature, despite the fact that it's a contradictory philosophy to Buddhism, it's actually sort of complementary. It's sort of a distinctive counter idea that, despite the fact that it has things that contradict the ideas of Buddhism and Eastern philosophy, it also has aspects of it that complement it due to the ideas of neutrality or amorality. And Toriyama decides to play on that heavily in Dragon Ball Z. He's essentially pitting these two ideas against each other as extremes. But somewhere in the middle, there's what we call balance. And that's what Dragon Ball Z really does well, is it takes these two ideas and it pits them against each other and shows the dangers of the extreme of each idea, but it also shows how the ideas complement each other and eventually equal out into balance. Now, this entire idea of Darwinism versus Buddhism actually stems from Journey to the West itself. The entire reason that Wukong does most of the things that he does that are considered evil or bad within the story is due to him just trying to survive and free himself from the karmic cycle of life and death that Buddha and the Taoist gods have trapped him into, essentially. And what's really cool about this is Goku as a character uses martial arts to tame his survival of the fittest nature that he gained from the Saiyans. And Gohan is born with the ability to curb this part of his nature naturally without really trying. And that's sort of what separates him from Goku, is the fact that he doesn't have to use martial arts to curb his nature. He has a very peaceful nature on the outside. But on the inside, he is no different than Goku in a lot of aspects. He actually has a beast himself dwelling within. So, what's really cool about Gohan, my favorite thing about Gohan, is the fact that Toriyama uses Goku as a means of sort of exploring the issues that Sun Wukong had in Journey to the West, but in a very different way. He implements some aspects of the main character from Journey to the West due to the fact that Goku is pure of heart and he is a good, quote-unquote, good guy within the story. But Gohan actually is much more reminiscent of Tripitaka, or the main character from Journey to the West, than Goku is. And I'll tell you why. Because Goku's struggle is to tame his nature with martial arts. That is Goku's struggle. Gohan's struggle is near identical to the main character from Journey to the West struggle, and that is the fact that he is so peaceful and so merciful by nature that it actually ends up sort of being a problem for him in certain cases. And one really cool detail to note here is when Gohan is first introduced into the story, he has a Dragon Ball on his hat. Now, the main character Tripitaka also has a hat, and on the hat is Buddha himself. And the reason for that is at the end of the Journey to the West, the goal was the Buddha Sutras, or the sutras that would bring peace and prosperity to the world. And Gohan, the Dragon Balls themselves have always been a replacement for this idea. So Gohan having this Dragon Ball on his head is actually a play on the hat that Tripitaka wore in Journey to the West, which is, a signifier that Gohan is sort of a representation of that character as much as he is Sun Wukong. And Toriyama loves to, mix and match these two characters because these two characters represented a duality of Buddhism and Darwinism within the story of Journey to the West. So that's the reason he does this. He likes to play on the mix of the duality of mankind in many, many different ways. And he does this in a much more unique and creative way with Gohan going into Dragon Ball Z. Not necessarily more than Goku, but he does, the way he handles it, the way he goes about going from one character that he worked very hard on, which is Goku, to the next character, Gohan, and the way he goes about switching it up and making Gohan more like the main character of Journey to the West rather than Sun Wukong is actually very, very creative. It's very creative for the next step of the series. Now, this is where the most important character for Gohan's growth is introduced, and that is Piccolo. Now, one thing people need to realize about Piccolo is that you'll find as the story progresses that Piccolo has a very, very similar ideology to the Saiyans, but it's actually way more reminiscent of the neutrality for the need of survival than Raditz, because Raditz, due to the fact that he's so powerful, he and the Saiyan race in general, they are used to being able to conquer things with ease. They are used to being able to conquer planets themselves with ease. And with Piccolo, that's also his goal, but it's also a struggle, right? And again, Piccolo right here is also very, very, very similar to the Monkey King in the fact that his goal is to take over Earth for the benefit of for himself, for his own survival, and to rule the planet as he sees fit. So Piccolo at this point in the story, he's not developed in the direction of complete neutrality, but he has started to take that step into just prioritizing survival itself rather than just being a tyrant who wants to rule over the planet. And that's a very important step for Piccolo, because Gohan ends up being what he needs to complete that step. Now, Piccolo working with Goku is actually it's a huge statement on this. It's a huge statement on how much Piccolo is starting to be humbled and how he's starting to tame his ego in the same sense as Goku does as a martial artist. And that is a very overlooked aspect of this exchange between Goku, Raditz, and Piccolo, is that Piccolo is actually showing us here firsthand the effect that Goku has had on him as a result of his interaction with him in the last series. And that's very important, because had Goku not had that effect on him, Goku would not have survived, and Gohan would have been kidnapped, and who knows what would have happened after that. So this is another example of Goku's attitude and his antics as a martial artist benefiting him and extending his life, and essentially causing him to beat the odds and end up coming out of this alive and well after being revived due to the effect that he has on the people around him. So Piccolo is on his way to having that same benefit. He's not quite there yet, but he's on his way to basically being in a similar position to Goku, where he has people willing to fight for him and willing to do things for him, because he also prioritizes survival at such a high regard. And that's something that's commonly overlooked about Piccolo's development here. Now, when Goku grabs Raditz's tail, that is the first indication that Raditz is sort of full of hot air, so to speak. He preaches this idea of Saiyan pride, but when his brother has the upper hand, he is begging for his life. If Vegeta was there, he would kill him for that, because according to Vegeta, that is not a true example of Saiyan pride. You are supposed to face the odds and not take the coward's way out. So this is to show you that Raditz actually has a false sense of Saiyan pride himself. And Raditz losing his so-called sense of Saiyan pride, or his pure nature as a Saiyan, ends up being his downfall. So as I pointed out earlier, there is a reference to Gohan in terms of his inspiration from the main character of Journey to the West through his hat. And the next reference we get that is an indication of another aspect of what influenced him as a character is when he bursts from the pod that Raditz trapped him in an effort to protect his father. Now, a lot of people just don't understand how deep this scene in particularly is, because the first scene is playing on Gohan's nature in terms of how similar he is to Tripitaka, the main character of Journey to the West. This right here is playing on the nature that Sun Wukong has as a character, and when the story starts of Journey to the West, Sun Wukong bursts from a stone egg whenever he is born in a lot of interpretations of the story. And bursting from this egg is also symbolically Gohan refusing to go backwards, refusing to develop backwards and head in the original direction that, again, is a representation of who Sun Wukong used to be as a character before, developing through Buddhist martial arts practices. This is a very creative way to play on the two sides of Gohan's personality, his self and his second self. And this series plays on the idea of the self and the second self almost constantly. You'll see that as I do my reviews. The self and the second self is a huge, long-running theme in Dragon Ball that encompasses pretty much every single character in the series. And so this is Toriyama's way of showing you the two different aspects of Gohan's personality and how they work. Now, what's very interesting about this is that Gohan, through Gohan's rage, he surpasses everything that Goku went through in the original Dragon Ball. All that godly training, he surpasses it all just from getting angry. He even surpasses Raditz, who at that point was an unstoppable force. So this just goes to show that Gohan, as a hybrid, the way his biology and the way his programming works is entirely different than Goku's. And the reason for that is Gohan's self and second self are much more separated in terms of his personality and the way he handles himself. His self and his second self they don't work together in harmony. They are two separate minds that work in very, very different ways. In one aspect, Gohan would never want to hurt anyone. In another aspect, he's willing to be as lethal as humanly possible to take down whatever threat is in his way. And that's a very, very interesting aspect of Gohan's character that's played on quite a bit that I really enjoy. So shortly after Raditz is defeated in one of the most iconic and cool scenes in the entire series, with Piccolo destroying Raditz and Goku at the same time, one sacrificing himself, one just trying to survive, and one serving as a means of development. This is such a cool scene. It's actually extremely underrated, and there's actually a lot of really deep symbolism here, especially if you factor in what Bardock wished for in Dragon Ball Super in the Granola arc. There's actually a lot of deep symbolism between Piccolo, Raditz, and Goku here. I'm not going to get into that into this video because I'm going to save that for whenever I do a video about Piccolo and or Goku, but it's a really, really cool scene that has a lot of context in terms of the Dragon Balls themselves and how they work. And as I've stated before in plenty of my videos, it all stems from karma, which is a natural law that causes certain circumstances to happen as a result of other circumstances. And this right here is like a crescendo of that effect that is so well put together that people really don't understand how well it is put together. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, this whole thing right here is a masterwork in terms of how it's put together. But after Raditz is defeated, the very last portion of this small section of the story with Gohan and Raditz is Vegeta and Nappa overhearing the conversation between Goku, Gohan, Piccolo, Raditz, etc. And what's really interesting about this is the six-eared macaque. Now count them: Raditz, Nappa, Vegeta. 2, 4, 6. The six-eared macaque, which is a representation of Sun Wukong's past, had the ability to eavesdrop on conversations throughout the entire universe. This is, again, another overlooked, underrated reference and or play on Journey to the West that people just do not appreciate. And that's why I always say it's very important to look at this through the lens of the source material, because there is so many cool references and stuff that Toriyama makes in this story to Journey to the West through a sci-fi-esque approach that it just makes the story that much more enjoyable. Once you understand that the ship that Goku came to Earth in is a representation of the stone egg that Sun Wukong was born in, then you can sort of see how Toriyama plays on Journey to the West. He takes aspects of it and he sprinkles in a sci-fi aesthetic, and he uses different aspects of the story to express parts of Journey to the West, but as though he's telling it through the lens of a sci-fi-esque movie, which is really creative, it's really cool, and it's also very underrated. Now, when Vegeta and Nappa overhear this conversation, they make it clear to us that hybrids must be capable of way more than full-blooded Saiyans. They are capable of powers beyond what full-blooded Saiyans are capable of in natural circumstances. And that's something very, very important that people forget about Gohan. You know, despite the fact that there's tons of examples of it, people forget that Gohan is a mutant. He is a hybrid mutant being who has a different biological structure, and people forget this. He's godly in his own right. So that is it for part 1 of my review of Gohan's character. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The next video I will be delving into Piccolo and Gohan's relationship and how important it is for the entirety of Dragon Ball in terms of the idea of balance. Because more than anything else, between the idea of the self and the second self, your ego and your instincts, balance is something that Dragon Ball as a whole preaches for people to practice in their lives, especially within the framework of martial arts, because this is a martial arts manga. And Piccolo and Gohan serve as a means of achieving balance through each other, much like Goku and Vegeta. And the way Toriyama goes about expressing this in his story is actually masterfully done. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.